Okay, welcome everyone. Today is Thursday, March 18th. Welcome to our CSI Secrets community call. Just a reminder, if you're new to the community call, this call is governed by the CNCF Code of Conduct. So just be nice with everyone, and I think you'll be okay. We got a pretty quick agenda to start off with. Again, if you're new and you're joining, please go ahead and add your name to the attendees list. And I guess before we kick it off, I see we do have someone I believe is new to the channel or the community call, Josh. If you want to, you can go ahead and introduce yourself to the community. And if you don't, that's okay. All right, and welcome, Micah.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. All right, so let's get into it. I'll be moderating, and I'll try to do double duty unless someone wants to help me out with taking some notes. And with that, let's go ahead and get into the first agenda item by Anish. Anish, let's talk about some of the highly talked about disconnected scenarios with his design. So Anish, take it away.
Yeah, so I have a design doc out there to go over disconnected scenarios. So initially when I drafted it, it was kind of a summary of what we had already discussed in the previous community call. And I also did share that with folks internally and got some feedback. So based on that, I made a few changes last minute. So the idea is, in case of disconnected scenarios, if existing deployment is scaled up or an existing pod gets restarted, we want to allow the pod to run without any mount failures. And we also have to figure out a way to provide the secrets from external secret store to that particular pod without any network access. So for the first problem, the way that we can solve it is we add an optional field called allow mount failures in the secret provider class. So when the CSI driver gets the node publish volume call for a restarted pod or an existing pod that's scaled up, if allow mount failure is set to true, then it'll mount the temp FS, and then it'll call the provider to get the secrets. But if the provider call fails, it will still assume that is a success and then return to kubelet so that the pod can start successfully. So that's the first step, right? To allow the pod to start. And then the second thing is, how does the pod get access to the secrets from the external secret store? So the last time we discussed, the idea was we will have the application have a fallback logic. So if the files are not found in the pod mount, then the application would rely on the Kubernetes secret that was synced before. So one concern with that is applications that are designed for disconnected scenarios have to have a understanding of Kubernetes secrets, and they need to have this custom logic just to be able to work in disconnected scenarios. But I think one thing that we can do is, instead of having that fallback logic in the application, we can move the fallback logic into the CSI driver. So in case of disconnected scenarios, we will use the Kubernetes secret that was synced before as our external secret store. So when after the mount, we invoke the provider call, and then we ask the provider to give us all the contents for the secret provider class. But if the call fails, then we look through the secret provider class and see if all those contents was previously synced as Kubernetes secret. If they were, then we can read the Kubernetes secret from the CSI driver and then write the contents of the secret into the pod mount. So that way, even pods in disconnected scenarios will start up with the volume mount and will have all the contents. So this is what I have in the design doc, right? So one thing is, when the user creates a secret provider class in disconnected scenario clusters, they have to make sure that everything that they have is the objects. So everything that they want to get from the external secret store is also synced in the Kubernetes secret object. So if they have it synced in the Kubernetes secret object, then we can just read from that and mount it for all the pods during the time when there is no network access. So I've summarized that approach in the design doc, and I would love a review on that.
Any quick thoughts, feedback?
Maybe another question is, have folks had a chance to review this in the past? Is this the first time we're talking about this, by the way? Sorry.
Yeah.
First time this is shared? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, we had talked about.
Yeah, we hinted on it. Maybe a couple of meetings. Sorry, go ahead, Tommy.
We had talked about the existence of the disconnected scenario problem, but this is the first time a design has been shared on it.
Yeah, in terms of the applications running during disconnected or prior to disconnection, it should be the same. Like they should still be able to just have a single logic which reads the secrets from the pod file system. And we'll just move the fallback logic to the CSI driver. So the CSI driver knows how to handle it during disconnected periods or when it has network access.
Actually, yeah, reading the comment that you had around the fallback logic, I actually had a question, like if as a application developer, if I were to actually, if I'm looking for the Kubernetes secret volume and not the CSI volume, then there really shouldn't be anything that I need to do, right? Like, because I just assume that the Kubernetes secrets will have what I need, and if it's disconnected, it would have the data, right?
So that's one option, right? But that also means that they always use the Kubernetes secret volume. So instead of having a fallback logic, so they define the CSI volume, but the CSI volume will trigger creation of Kubernetes secret, and then they have the Kubernetes secret as Kubernetes volume. So if they do, I mean, I think as a user, they would just want to use a single volume, right? They wouldn't want to have the CSI to trigger Kubernetes secret and use that as another volume. So they can always just rely on the CSI volume, and we can just say during disconnected periods, the Kubernetes secret is our external secret store. So we will automatically just read from that and populate it for you in just this single volume. So you can just always read from this particular volume.
Gotcha. So, and you said the assumption is that did you say that that the assumption is that they've turned on other features, right? Like the secret rotation stuff?
So that's not really required. With this, we don't need to have rotation. The only assumption is, or actually we should tell users recommendation is every secret that's critical for them, even during disconnect period, has to be part of their sync secret object. So in the secret object, they need to have all the credentials as key values so that everything is already there, and then we populate all that in the pod mount when it's required. So for instance, today in the secret provider class, you could have secret 1, secret 2, and secret 3. But in secret objects, if you only have secret 3 because you need that as an environment variable, then we will miss out secret 1 and 2, right? But if they need all of those in the pod mount, they just have to add everything to the secret objects array so that when we try to read from Kubernetes secret, we give them an exact copy of what they really want.
Okay, so I'm just trying to take some notes. So if this make mount option is optional, and we assume that the user has a sync secret and rotate secret features on, then my question is, as an app developer, why wouldn't I just use the Kubernetes secret volume?
No, they can use it, right? But I'm just saying if they have to use it, they need to have 2 volumes essentially. And I don't think as an app developer, I want to do that, right? Because the CSI volume has no real significance at all here if the Kubernetes secret is all I want to do. If they can just automatically create the Kubernetes secret on their own and they can use that as a secret volume. But having the CSI volume just to create the Kubernetes secret might be a major ask from the application developer. So today the assumption is they have the CSI volume and they read from it, right? And then some users want to sync that as Kubernetes secret, but that's mostly for ingress or for TLS purposes. TLS purposes or for environment variables. But for disconnected scenarios, if we are saying the app has to always rely on the secret volume, then the CSI volume has no real significance at all here.
Well, it's a volume that they're not using directly in their application, but it impacts another volume. if you think about it, right?
That's right. But if something is wrong with the CSI driver during the disconnect period, it still is part of their runtime path. So anytime they try to scale up, we're still failing because even though the Kubernetes secret already exists, they're still failing, right? So I think the user would assume that it's still required in some way. And I think if it's still required, we can try to give them what they need in the single mount path so they don't have to do something special for disconnected scenarios. So they don't have to go and mount a different path for disconnected and use the default path for the not disconnected scenarios.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Okay. What we'll do is we'll publish this out initially on the channel and get some more eyes on it. Hopefully we can have this as a line item in the next meeting and go a little deeper on it.
Yeah, and I can also, I've been working on a small POC. I'll try to demo that in the next call.
Great. Okay, next up, you again, Anish. We're talking about v.0.21 release.
Yeah, so we merged the Lotus-based changes and optimizations this week, and we also merged few E2E tests. So the initial plan was I was thinking we should release it today, but there's also this one PR that Tommy opened. So basically, that's the first step where the driver starts writing the files in the pod mount instead of the providers. So it's a backward compatible change. It's still optional. So I was thinking we should probably review and get that also merged in the next release so that providers can start implementing the changes with an available release for this. So if we want to do that, I was thinking we can move the release by 2 or 3 days so we can do it early next week. And I wanted to know what others were thinking.
I'm happy to wait to get my change in, but yeah, I'm also happy to defer if others need their release sooner.
Yeah, it has the proto changes, so I think it'll be great if we can get this also in, and then all providers can start implementing instead of waiting for 4.0.22 with this change.
Okay. All right. Next up, Rita, let's talk about SIGAUTH and the CI jobs for the project.
Oh, it was just something that Anish brought up yesterday. I dropped earlier in the SIGAUTH call, and apparently they were also looking at this project's CI jobs as part of their usual issue triage and CI health. So I thought, just want to mention that SIGAUTH is looking at this project's health. So yay.
Yeah. It's awesome. Big time now. All right. And last, we have Micah talking about token requests. Let's open it up.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm pretty new to this project, but I'm very excited about it. I was looking at the token request issue, and I started a PR just to try to wrap my head around like what would be needed to support that. And I think my understanding was that basically when kubelet calls like I think it's node publish volume, that if it's already been called, then it just basically skips calling mount again. But that's how the kubelet propagates token refresh to propagate it to the driver. So I was wondering, I guess it's kind of it's a pretty big change probably to assume that mount could be re-invoked on the driver. I just wondered if that was like an expectation, or if that wasn't an expectation for providers to say mount could be re-invoked, or if a second call needed to be made to that might be expected to be atomic or something like that.
I think as part of the secret rotation, that this is kind of already built into the mount request. There's trying to look it up, but there's some metadata on the mount request that will signal to the provider the previous results of the previous mount. Anish, can you describe that better?
Yeah. So as part of the mount request, we have this field called object versions. So we tell the provider what current object versions are mounted and synced as Kubernetes secret. And the provider can basically read this and decide if they want to make an external API call, based on any internal cache mechanisms, or they could just respond back without doing any external call and say, everything is good, there's nothing to update. And the way we have designed it for driver provider calls is it should be idempotent, right? Like it doesn't have any impact, and any additional call for the same target path and same volume should still yield it always with the same result. So we have it that way. And right now in node publish, if the volume is already mounted, yes, we just say it's already mounted and return back without calling provider. But I think with the republish volume, we should go ahead and just call the provider again to make sure that everything is correct, and then the values haven't been overwritten. So I think that will be a right approach to do.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, just because it seems like that would be could be a surprising expectation. Okay.
Are there
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Are there any plugins that use that? I know that GCP one doesn't consider the object version stuff. I don't know if the Azure one is using that field yet.
Yeah, we checked that today. We checked the field and then we populated. Okay. But yeah, I think also the other interesting part when I saw this republished volume was we could just rely on that for secret rotation, because we mimic almost the same logic today for rotation purposes. So we have a periodic reconciler which gets a list of current objects for a particular pod, and then it calls the provider and then sees if there's any update. And if there's any update, it updates the mount path, and then it also updates the Kubernetes secret. And this republish is essentially just another loop which calls the node publish periodically. So I think we can actually piggyback on that in the future, and instead of having our own reconciler, we can just rely on that completely to do the rotation.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, it's a draft PR right now, so I'll try to spend some time on it and make it add anything else it needs before someone really reviews it. And in doing this, I also kind of realized so there's not an AWS provider publicly yet. It's in development. I just was reviewing the code this week for it. It would be awesome to have an E2E test provider that was just like, didn't require a real, external API call. So you didn't have to have any external infrastructure or API key set up, but just could like simulate this, this invocation just for testing purposes. So I don't necessarily need to tie that to this PR because that might be more work. That would make it kind of gargantuan. But I might also try to like start that just so that in my own testing of this, I get my head around what's going on. But I wondered if that could be like a separate PR and if that would be cool.
Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. I mean, I think it can be used as a reference for new providers as well, right? Like how they implement it and stuff. So that's actually a great idea. Okay.
And then one other issue that came up as I was like doing this was, and I think you commented on this already, Anish, was the propagating the volume context down to the provider. Like that's not done today. Even if it was just for setup, even if it wasn't on like republish or anything, but if it was just for setup, that way, like, right, because right now you're propagating like pod name, namespace, UID, and service account, which is great. And with this PR, I have like the tokens themselves, but any metadata that like a pod creator defines could be useful to the provider. The provider can choose what to do with it or not. But it'd be additional, key value metadata just for auditing or whatever. Like I could see that being a useful feature. I don't think I'll include that in this change just so that it's separate, but I didn't know if that was like part of the threat model that pod creator might be malicious and so not to pass things and trust them in the provider, or if that was like just, oh yeah, we'll just pass it through.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if it was intentional. I think when it started off initially, it was only few fields and that was required. So the driver would just set the ones required. But then the more I thought about it, it did make sense to just pass the entire thing, right? Because in terms of new features that get added, we don't want to have to update the driver just to support that feature if it's just part of a map, all these key value pairs. So we could just update node publish to send the entire volume context. And then for rotation purposes, we still have to rely on manually constructing the volume context. So we'll keep updating that. But I think as we think about using republish for rotation, maybe it's just all one single path, right? So then we don't have to have these multiple ways to do things. So.
Cool. All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. Appreciate
it. Can you open an issue for that so we can track?
Yeah, it's for issue 475. It's already open.
Specifically for volume context?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I think the gRPC change really made a big difference. Like, because we wouldn't be able to do that with the old way of doing things. With the old binary approach.
All right.
How long ago did that cutover happen? I'm fairly new to this project, so I don't know.
About
a couple months.
6 months.
1 month. Wait, 6?
gRPC, oh yeah. I think 6 months back we introduced that as an option. And then I think last month was when all providers migrated to using it. So now that's the default way to do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
Has it been 6 months since we talked about it? Oh my God. Okay. Seems like yesterday.
All right. And then she snuck one more in here. Let's talk about the security RFP.
So yeah, the RFP has been extended to March 26th for the security audit. We have one proposal from one vendor and the audit team is basically reviewing it right now. The CSI driver is still part of it. It's under secrets management. So the RFP is extended. The audit team is going to be reaching out to a few other vendors to see if you can get a proposal. And then after that, they'll make a decision on which vendor to go with.
All right. All right, that takes us to the end. Any other comments or anything anyone else wants to talk about before we end the meeting?
Did you guys talk about the KubeCon talk that you guys got accepted?
We didn't talk about it.
Let's
But
hear about
yeah,
it.
me and Tommy had submitted for a talk. It's called Secrets to CSI, Keeping Secrets Secret. So we're going to be talking about the CSI driver. I'll share the link for the session. Tommy, do you want to add anything?
No, you did great. Yeah.
Looking forward to that. All right. Well, thanks everyone for showing up. Ironically, our next call will land on April Fool's Day, so April 1st in a couple of weeks. So with that, we'll go ahead in the call. If you got any agenda items for the next call, please go ahead and I'll have the format ready for you. And this call, which has been recorded, we should have this published within the next 24 hours. And we'll link that out to the Slack site for others to view. All right, thank you everyone, and have a good day. And we will see you on the next call.